Kia ora and welcome to Tarmac. I'm Harry.
I'm Matthew, and just look at the smiles on both of our faces, something that can only be explained by the presence of this. As you can see from the front, it says Turbo Emira, and yes, the four-cylinder has returned to Lotus in the form of this, the new Emira four-cylinder turbo.
That's right, enough chit chat. We'll try and make the walk around as quick as can be so we can actually go and drive this thing. Come on, let's have a look at this.
Now, I'll first touch on the fact that that sticker in the front there is actually not a factory option. It's more something that the tasteful dealer principal at Lotus Auckland has put on the front there, just to add to the character of this car. Pointing your attention to the front, that badge, the Lotus logo, the colors have been altered slightly from its original hues to make the brand a bit more friendly, if you like. Bring a bit more color to the badge specifically, and that really is a striking looking thing on this particular Emira with the darker color. Looks wise, there isn't actually much at all to tell it apart from the V6 supercharged model, but in saying that, that's not at all a detriment to the car, because it is such a good looking thing. The way the lines flow, especially you'll see around the side, it makes it look exotic. Everywhere you go, the car draws eyes, and for those who really know the Lotus brand, there's so much of similarity here to their electric hypercar, the Avaya, and that is fully intentional, because this Emira is almost meant to be, if you like, a road-going baby version of that electric monster. But today, I mean, I'll just take a step back and let you look at the front, because it is just a work of art and definitely draws your eyes. Now, what I probably should have covered while I was at the front of the car, but instead I was actually mesmerized by its beauty, is that front panel there. Now, looks can be deceiving, and they certainly are in this case, because that is not a frunk, and underneath there is no storage space. But instead, if you have a look through the little gap there, you can see that the front end does serve an extremely important purpose in terms of its aerodynamics and cooling in terms of what it hides under there. So underneath, you can see the radiators, there's a cooling fan, so some serious hardware going on there to keep this car planted and at the same time cool and able to perform at its best at all times. Now, taking a step back, the lines, yes, of the Emira look really good, and it looks quite a compact sports car, which it is actually. So the length is only about 4.4 meters long. Width sits at about 1.89 meters, and then height-wise, you can see even somebody like me is towering over it. So just imagine Harry. It's 1.225 tall, so relatively compact, short wheelbase, but that's exactly what you want from a mid-engine performance car like this. Obviously, all of that aero, all of the sort of power, everything is useless without it being put to the road, and these tires and wheels do an amazing job of that. So you got 20 inches both front and rear, but the wheels at the front are 245s in width, while the rear ones are 295. So you can clearly see that this is a rear-wheel drive biased car. Speaking of bias, take a step back and just point out the lines and the way this color shows on the car. So this is the Nimbus Gray, one of 3 different gray colors you can have on the Emira, but I think Harry and I personally would be inclined to go for either the Hetal Yellow, which looks excellent, or the Seneca Blue as well, for those philosophers among you. And there is also a really beautiful Verdant, a green color as well, that is worth pointing out. So if you're looking at an Emira, I'd suggest taking a look at one of those 3 colors as well. Taking a step back, this is something to point out here. It says Emira First Edition on there, which means that this car does come with a few additional extras, especially on the inside, that would normally be options that you would have to tick when specifying your car, but they do come as part of this first edition package. Anyway, now that I'm back here, I think it's time we talk about what's under the bonnet. The rear of the Emira serves a duality in terms of its purpose. So the boot back here is 151 liters in terms of space, which is quite usable, but the only downside is that whatever you put in there will get quite hot over especially a longer, harder drive. So make sure you don't put any foods or things, otherwise they might come out barbecued, or that could be the intention too. But the more important thing back here, or more so in the middle of the car, is that engine with the Lotus cover on it. Now, hiding underneath there is actually a Mercedes AMG powered powertrain. And what that is a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. It puts out 360 horsepower, which is roughly 268 kilowatts of power and something like 430 Newton meters of torque. What that means is a 0 to 100 sprint time of 4.4 seconds. So it is quick, and as you'll see from later on, it's certainly a very theatrical powertrain to listen to. Well, I haven't got much more to say about the numbers, to be honest, because something that's always been so important with the Lotus experience is the handling and the way this car makes you feel. So I think let's go get in the car and quantify some of that for you. Okay, so we're inside the Emira now, and Harry will, as we'll show you through a whole bunch of useful tidbits, that it is actually a really nice place to be. You know, for a sports car that's so low slung, it's relatively easy to get in and out of. And then once you're in, which is actually the nice part, that you're in, you're comfortable, you're set in the seat, everything feels good to touch, within reach. And it's just a nice place to be in here.
Yeah, it really is. The quality of the materials is spot on. I don't think that we found a single place that we would sort of fault in terms of build quality or what sort of texture they decided to put. And as you said, it might be a little bit hard to get in and out. At the end of the day, it is quite a low car. But once you're in, there is so much adjustability on the seats. For the two of us, we could bring it all the way forward, all the way back. I loved the fact that you can really bring it down low and raise the support for the back of your thighs, because it's something that can be quite compromising on sports cars. Not the case here. It's a very good place to be.
It is indeed. And then when you add those first edition touches to the, I guess, touch points of the car, the Alcantara everywhere, the leather, the badge, all of that stuff, it really, central marker on the steering wheel, it adds to the experience in here, and certainly the speciality of this drive. But I have to say, I'm not such a big fan of Alcantara, especially when it's in the contact points like the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And in this case, not on the gear shifter, thankfully.
Yeah, it looks amazing for now. You probably have to wait and see how it is going to be over the years. Maybe since you can customize so much on these cars, you could get them inverted, as in the top of the door in Alcantara and then the rest in leather. That might be a better option. But hey, it's a sports car. You want it to be a little bit racier, so that's how you get it.
Absolutely. And there are two different essentially suspension modes available. You can have the Tour or you can have the Sport. This one is the firmer setup, and you do feel the difference when you're in the car. It does let you know about all the little undulations and bumps on the road and stuff like that, but it is part of the experience. Admittedly, if you're a bit of an older customer or have a bad back, I think as we do, the Tour suspension setup is probably the one to go for.
Yeah, because it doesn't have that one and done kind of approach to the bumps. You go through an undulation, and then there is a little bit of like a second and a third bump to go with it. It comes down to what you expect and what you are trying to extract out of the car. So yeah, I think I am with you on this one, and I would have probably spec'd the softer.
But then what that means is that the suspension translates into the experience of the car. It is, while this may be the luxurious two-seater Lotus sports car, it is still a Lotus sports car, very much so, and they don't want you to forget that in any element of it. So even the steering feel, for example, is so good. It feels like you're so in touch with the road. The suspension itself, while it being harder for a longer touring type drive, it gives you all the feedback you want from the road surface underneath, and makes you feel, I think, truly connected to the car in a way that only a Lotus can do.
Yeah, that's very true. Here on these bends that we were going through a little while ago, it is very easy to see how much there is to be said about a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car. There is not a lot of weight on the front axle, so then that alongside the hydraulic steering rack transmits a lot of the feel, and even with all of that, it is still very light and maneuverable. So you feel that while it might not be a featherweight like the Elises of the past, it is still a light car, and you get to experience all of that without needing a ton of power.
But then, even if you need the power, well, when you want the power, you just drop a couple of gears, even in tour mode, and away you go. It just picks up just like that. I think what we both want to say about that 4-cylinder is that it is quite special. It's not like a regular 2-liter 4-pot. This thing, you know, is so entertaining. There's so much pantomime to it. It pops and it bangs and it crackles and it whooshes, and you can hear the turbo flutter.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's not just a 4-cylinder, right? It's the most powerful 4-cylinder engine, and now that it is just here, like a couple of, it's so close to our heads, you get to experience a lot of the noise, even noises that you usually don't get when it is all the way there up the front after a firewall. So it adds to experience 100%. And then you also get the turbo spooling up that helps build that anticipation of this shove that we just experienced. So yes, you might get a little bit more of a naturally aspirated experience with the V6, but the 4-cylinder has a lot to add to this car as well.
It sure does, but before you get access to that, you have to go through this gearbox. Now that's quite characterful in itself as well. The gearbox being a DCT or dual clutch transmission, also coupled with Mercedes or with the Mercedes powertrain, and flicking in between the drive and the reverse takes a bit of getting used to in terms of double and triple shifting, but once you're in drive, you just put your foot down and away you go. It is so quick, and even though Lotus have actually dulled it down a little bit, this only outputs 360 horsepower, when we know this engine is capable from factory to do 421 horsepower. But what they've done is, well, it's enough. 360, and the response is plenty.
Yeah.
It makes this so entertaining to drive. You've got enough of power to get you into the red zones of the speed limits very easily. Trust me, it doesn't need more.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it still pays respect to the V6 powertrain that sits above it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's probably one of the big reasons why they decided to go with this specific approach. And I think that it suits the character of the car quite well, right? Because it's not too big of a grand tourer. It is a mid-engine, smallish vehicle. So the 4-cylinder idea has this mountain of torque once it spools up and it just shoves you on the seat and away you go. So yeah, it's very good.
And then there's the Emira itself and the Lotus experience. Well, I was actually in England in July earlier this year, and I was fortunate enough to go to the Lotus plant in Hethel and do a tour of the factory and just see exactly how something like this is put together. And it's amazing that even in this day and age, buying from a brand, or particularly the Emira from Lotus, gives you access to a car that's involves so much of production care in the way it's put together, mostly by hand. It's not something that is so commonly found, especially at this price point. Yeah. So it makes you feel like you're in something special, something exotic, even more so than normal.
Exactly. Yeah, that's such a good point, because in this price bracket, there are other options that might bring more prestige or might bring more numbers. But I think that what you get in the Emira is something that is really tailored for people that are expecting this kind of stuff. The exotic looks that draw so much attention on the road, and the fact that you are driving something that derives all the way back from that formula of the Elises of the past. And I think that it is even an interesting thought of experiment as to whether or not this bridges the gap between the Elises of the past and the stuff that Lotus is doing right now with the super electric SUVs with all the luxury. Because yes, it is still mid-engine, it is still small, but it has those touches that cars like the Elise didn't have. So I don't know the answer to that. Maybe leave in the comments what you think about that. But yeah, I completely agree with you.
But then if you're well, let's say done talking about the car, about the history, about the experience, all you need to do is just change the drive mode into sport and then take over manual control of the gearbox and plant your foot basically.
Even from the passenger seat, it is such a neutral experience. It doesn't feel like it is trying to bite you all the time, or that you are about to run out of front grip. It feels so on track and neutral. It's amazing.
I am not the greatest driver in the world, and in my hands, this thing isn't even being tested at all. But it still makes you feel that, you know, it can go, as you can see, from a sedate Grand Tourer to like a corner attacking monster with just the flick of a button and planting your foot. There's so much that it offers in that sense that you really have to drive it to be appreciated. I don't think any amount of reviewing or talking can actually do justice to the experience that you get from driving this Emira. So there you have it, something quite special for both Harry and I, because this is the first mid-engine car we have both ever driven, and well, what a way to experience it via Lotus, the brand that's renowned for its handling, that's renowned for its lightweight sports cars, and I think the Emira is one of the finest to come from those stables, in terms of both its cornering ability, its acceleration, its involvement, the theatrical, the drama, all of that stuff, and then the luxurious touring side of it as well.
Yeah, it looks super special inside, in, out, and it has all the things to back up the claims that it does with the way that it looks. So yeah, what a great way to set off into mid-engine world.
And I think that we've got a couple of Tarmac Live top tips to share here. So firstly, when you're speccing your Emira, make sure you, well, drive one, because that is the best way to experience the Lotus feel. And then the other one is take a look at the color catalog, because they've got some beautiful shades available there. There you have it, the Lotus Emira 4-cylinder turbo. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. The button will be around here somewhere, and we'll see you on the next one.
See ya.